Hello and welcome back to our sustainable journey. I'm Steve. Today we're going to talk about black soldier flies. So we see a lot of people, or I see a lot of people. We see a lot of people? I don't know. Maybe we both do. My one viewer and myself see people ask about what these giant maggots are that are in their bins. So I'm going to grab a handful of black soldier fly larvae. So these guys you will commonly find in your worm bins. We'll find them in our compost pile. Basically doing the same thing that the worms are doing, just in a much grander scale. They break down food scraps just as much as your worms do, but in a different way. And they generate what's called frass. So all this stuff in here is frass. So that's their poop, versus castings, which is the worm poop. And so what these guys do is they don't actually have mouths, but they still break down the food scraps. They heat it up. It turns into, I don't know, I'm 100% making this up. I'm assuming they kind of liquefy everything, wait till everything's rotting into goo, and then somehow they slurp it up. They supposedly they don't have mouths, is what I'm told. So you won't get a bite from these guys or anything like that. And you can see he's kind of looking around for some food. I'm gonna put him back in here, and then I separated these guys out. They don't live very long. Basically, they go through this larval stage where they eat, they escape out of these bins, and become solid. Let's see if maybe I can find a dead one in here. They turn like this blackish color, and we feed them to our chickens when we find them. I think this guy's almost dead. Yeah, you can see they've turned black. And so then they escape out of the bin and go into the ground. Some of them turn into flies. The flies mate. They lay eggs over top of the bins, so you can put something over top of your bins, like corrugated cardboard is what we use, and then the flies will lay eggs. The eggs will drop down. When they hatch and they start growing into these giant maggots. And these are black soldier flies. These are good for all right. So they're relatively good for your bin. We don't use these, but we find them in our compost all the time, and they're a good thing. But what they do is they will heat up your bin. So if you have a lot of them, like if I had all of these in a worm bin, this mass would be very, very warm, and that would cause problems for my worms. So we generally don't like them in our worm bins, but they'll get in there, and they're relatively harmless. You know, they're just wiggling in my hand. Not really doing much besides trying to find some food. So they're interesting to watch. I don't spend a lot of time with them because I don't like them in my bins. I like them in my compost, but I don't like finding them in my bins because that could be a problem, because they like I said, they're going to heat up your bins because they like it hot. They will heat up so on a really, really hot day, it's kind of cool right now. We're probably in the 70s. So it's rare finding them this time of year. Normally I see them when it's in the 80s and 90s. So I was lucky to get this patch of them. But yeah, they like it hot, and they're not soft like worms. They're like little armadillos. See, they just wiggle around, trying to find food. So that is the pest that most people find in their worm bins, besides springtails and what's another one that I see a lot of? Potworms is another one. So those are the white little maggots, or I guess they're not maggots. They're like little white worms. Everyone thinks they're baby worms. They're not. They're potworms, because baby worms are not white. Baby worms are pink. So that's another pest that you're gonna find in your bin. I don't think I have either one of those in any of my worm bins. No. Just see, these are. Let's see. I'll grab a flashlight so you can see these a little bit brighter. Those are baby worms. Hopefully that you can see this clearly, but see all these ones on the edges? These are babies. We don't have any potworms. Usually you get potworms when you have a really wet bin. So that's a good sign that you've overfed your bin. See, there's more avocados growing. No matter how many times I pull them, they always come back. So those are the main pests that people see are springtails, which are good. Mites you're gonna see a lot of, which we saw in a few videos ago. And potworms and the black soldier flies. See, there's a bunch of babies right there. I don't have any other pests. There's babies climbing on the side. There's probably some springtails in there moving around. Not too many. So lots of life in the worm bin, because black soldier flies are just one of them. And there are some people who just vermicompost with black soldier flies, which is kind of cool. It's kind of the same idea, right? Composting with worms, vermicompost, these are a type of worm. And you certainly can. The downside is you have to keep them breeding. So the ones that turn into flies, you have to capture them and get them to breed. And so the way you do that is they don't like light, and they're flies. They will fly. And so you have to have netting. So we have a whole setup in the barn with like a mosquito net to kind of keep them in where we want them, so that they're breeding in the right spot, and then making sure that it's the right conditions for them, because they're not going to lay eggs unless they're in the right conditions. See, look at all these worms. Lots of baby worms. See, and I'm going through sifting, and as I sift, I find things that don't belong. They get brought to the surface. And the drawback to what we do with collecting waste from the general public is you find stuff that really doesn't belong in a compost bin. The other day I found a wine bottle, which was way off. I guess the liquid inside would have been fine, but the bottle itself, not so much. I found spoons. I found a yo-yo, tea set, spoons galore, tea strainers. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't belong in your food scraps, your compost bin, that we end up getting. Cans, soda cans, your grocery store bags, like your Jewel bags. Those are not compostable bags. It's not the same thing. Don't put it in your bucket for us to collect with your food scraps. But yeah, other than that, everything's looking good. So One more handful to show you guys them. They've got a different smell to them. It's not the earthy smell that the worm bins have. It's more of a rotting meat smell. That's what they're attracted to. So that's usually what we use to attract the flies originally in the spring. And then we just hope that they keep breeding, because we don't have a way of keeping them alive in the winter. So we just let them finish out their life cycle and feed them to the chickens as a treat at the end of the season. But we use them to break down food scraps. So they do a good job. They like meat more than the worms do. So look at meat. There you go. Black soldier fly. Look them up. I know enough to be dangerous, but nearly not enough to be good at farming them. I'll stick to worms. I know lots about them. So there you go. That's what's in your worm bin. Black soldier fly larva. So last week, I did what was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. And now, I'm going to do the second dumbest thing I've ever done. So if you remember, we had a hornet nest in one of our trees. And so we got it out of the tree. And what you do is you put it in a garbage bag. And then you put it in the freezer. And so now it's been about a week. Hopefully, this is why it might be the dumbest thing. Hopefully all of the hornets are dead or frozen to death. We're going to open it up and I'm going to take a look at it and see what it looks like on the inside. So I want you to be here to witness what may or may not be my death. Imagine all these hornets coming to life and getting me. Ooh, that's a lot of them. So there's the hole they're all kind of spilling out of. These are called bald-faced hornets. I don't know why. I'm assuming it's because of the white faces that they have. But they're terrifying. They do not have barbed stingers, so they can just keep stinging you forever. They just built this nest into our oak. So, let's see if I can cut it in half. I don't see anybody alive. Nope, they're all dead. All right. So really the outer layer is just a protection for this inner layer. You can see that. This inner layer of the nest. So we have a few more hornets. Doesn't look like there were too many. that's kind of cool. So these little jerks will sting you for no reason. They're just angry. So that's what it looks like. So they just keep expanding and expanding. I think this time of year is when they expand the most to prepare their nest for winter. Cool.